Well,
Attitude Sports.
But in this case, I believe
Attitude Sports, exclusive content.
The foremost member of the Hart dynasty. He is the excellence of execution. He's the best there is.
The best
there was. The best there ever will be. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Hitman, Mr. Bret Hart. Yeah, like I'm going to take that chair over you. Well, thanks, Mr. Hart, for coming. It's a privilege. Welcome to the Super Mega Fest. Let's see. I wanted to. I was thinking I'll just have a few questions that I'd like to pose to you, and you can talk about whatever you'd like to, and then we can field some questions from the audience. Sure. Great. Let's see. All right. So, in doing my research regarding you, I didn't know about your amateur background in high school and college. Being part of the Hart family with your dad, Stu Hart, the legendary Stu Hart, did you ever think you would ever be off the path that was your destiny to professional wrestling? Did you ever consider anything else, any other interests that you wanted to pursue?
Well, the truth is I did not want to become a wrestler.
Wow.
I mean, I did when I was little. I went through phases. When I was real small, I loved wrestling when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
But by the time I was about 12, it was mostly the era that I was in. My dad, some of the wrestlers that my dad had back then just weren't that good. So, I don't know, I kind of lost interest in it and kind of saw it as a, I don't know, like I didn't see it as a good way to make a living. I didn't like the traveling aspect of it. I always thought, my dad was gone forever. I don't want to do that to my kids.
Understandable.
It changed. I mean, I did a lot of construction work and stuff like that. And after college and during college and after high school even. And I just warmed up to wrestling by the time I was about 20. My brothers were doing it. It was like one of the big influences that people don't realize or don't know is a guy named Jay Youngblood, who was a wrestler out of Texas. And he did a lot for, I can remember him talking to me about, you got to get into wrestling. You got to, he was getting into it. And he was the first wrestler that was close to my age that gave me a big talk about, you got to do it. You got to do it. And that was the first time, that would have been about in the late 70s, early 70s, no, about 77 or 78. And that was the first time I started thinking more about really being a wrestler, and what it would take, and what I needed to do, and how if I was going to be a wrestler, how I would want to present myself, and things like that. And again, a few years, when it finally came, I was about 21 when I started, or 20, and it wasn't that glamorous a job back then. It wasn't a whole lot different than being a topless dancer in a strip club. Kind of the same thing, except for with blood and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, wrestling was a hard life for the hard. The people in it were tough guys and hard men. And the traveling was tough. But my logic when I was 20 years old, especially after doing construction for enough years, and and sitting around guys at my lunch break and stuff, and sitting around talking about pipe fittings and stuff like that. I just realized that I needed to find another line of work. I reasoned at that time when I was about 20. I said I want to travel around the world. I want to make some money, and I want to stay in shape, and I want to meet girls.
Hell yeah.
And wrestling seemed like a pretty good ticket to all that. So I got into wrestling. I always thought it would be about 3-4 years. I said, I'll do this for 3-4 years, and then I'll get serious about my life.
Wow.
But in my final thought on all that is that when I first started wrestling, the very first day I trained to be a wrestler, I spent about 5 hours in the basement of my dad's house training with these 2 Japanese wrestlers. And they put me through the whole, like a really tough circuit. And, you know, I came through with flying colors, and I remember afterwards they took me up to my dad, and they were telling my dad how good I was, and that I was natural, and that I was really, really good. They used to tell my dad even then that I was better than all my brothers. And I don't know that, you know, you always think, oh, they're just saying that, but, you know, I started to realize after just a few months that I was good. Like I had a good technique and a good style, and my work was. There's things that you got to improve on all the time, like your tan and your body itself. But I mean, for the most part, I was a pretty solid wrestler right from day one. You know, I wrestled when I first started. I wrestled like I had been wrestling for 2 or 3 years anyway. And you know, when I came to WWE or WWF, which was 1984 August, I remember no one rated me or anything. They thought I was just a sort of one-off. I'd be there for a couple of weeks and get rid of me because I had no skills. And most of the wrestlers didn't want to. The guys I was working with in those days didn't want to do much with me either. They wanted to have the simplest, easiest match and sit in a headlock for 15 minutes. And you know, I can remember after like 6 months or a year there, especially when I tagged up a Neidhart, which would have been about a year later, they'd come up to my dad and say, he's really getting it now. He's starting to get good. You know, like my dad would get really mad. He was a good polished wrestler before he ever left to go down there. And you know, but they kind of thought that they taught me or they learned me. I learned so much in a 6-month span while in the beginning. That's not necessarily true. I was pretty good before I started.
There's a lot of interesting info to be found in a couple really good DVDs. I love Wrestling with Shadows. That's fantastic. It's one of, if not the best, I think, documentaries on pro wrestling. Just riveting. You know, you watch it and you just see, and the way it plays out, it's almost like a tragedy the way it plays out. But there's a lot. I mean, I tell you, I don't think I could have survived the dungeon. Man, you guys.
I'm saving that. Not very many did.
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't think so. It was an unbelievable, I guess, rite of passage, and just the endeavor that you had to, accomplish. Just doing going through the dungeon. And I'm sure your father didn't take it easy on you. In some ways, I bet it was hard.
Yeah, they talk about my dad all the time, like he was like a monster.
Torture. Yeah.
Tortured you.
Yeah.
You know, but the truth is, and he did torture a lot of people down there. The real truth is that he really was very passionate about teaching you. He tried to teach you. He wanted to teach you everything he knew, and he just tried a little too hard. He just was obsessed with. You could wake my dad up at 4 a.m. and say, "Hey, I got 2 Chippendale dancers downstairs that want to become wrestlers." And he couldn't get his pants on fast enough. He was excited about wrestling. He said, "I have 2 football players down there." He wanted to go down and show football players that wrestling was no easy job. And he just took a lot of pride in what he did. But he was a really good teacher. And there's guys that sort of talk about my dad like he was a sort of almost like a bully or a mean guy. But he wasn't. He was just really passionate about trying to teach you to be the toughest guy in the world. And a lot of guys missed that point.
The other set, DVD rather, I wanted to bring up was that nice 3D set, 3-disc set, the best there was. I think what's it called? Excellence of Execution. Best there ever will be. Yeah, from WWE video. It's great just to. Well, the documentary is cool because you see the evolution of you as a young kid in Stampede Wrestling, your style, your look, and then holding the title there. And when you came down Canada to Connecticut was the home base, right, in New York, and Connecticut. How you started off as like a jobber type until. And then there was a gimmick idea for you regarding, this is kind of funny, the cowboy gimmick.
Yeah, Cowboy Bret Hart.
Yeah. Like you said in the video, all my fans are thankful that never happened.
Yeah.
So, and then it took off with, you came into your own.
I was dying on the vine.
Yeah.
I've been beat for about 8-9 months everywhere, but I wasn't on TV at all. They put me on TV about 3 times.
Yeah.
And I was just spinning my tires and just going nowhere. And I knew, I told myself when I started in WWE, or WWF, that I didn't want to end up like that. I didn't want to be the bottom guy, just, bottom feeder. I told them that before I started down there. And, I had a lot of pride in what my skills really were, but, when they came to me with that Cowboy Bret Hart idea, they were so excited about it that I kind of got myself excited. And it's not, I remember they're telling me they're going to put the horse in the box, and it's going to be the horse and action figure in the same set. And I'm thinking, well, the horse will get the residuals on it. But anyway, I thought, remember, I got pretty excited about it. It's like I've been kind of pleading with them to give me some kind of a break, and they finally, it's like, we got it. Cowboy Bret Hart. I got kind of excited about it, and, thinking about it and talking about it, and on the ride up, it was Jim Neidhart, might have been Jimmy Hart and Adrian Adonis. And, Jim kept laughing. He just kept laughing, and like he'd look at me and start laughing again. Cowboy, and he kept talking about it, and then they get in about a 10-minute talk about how screwed up it was going to be, the hats and all that. Anyway, they kind of spooked me out of it. I remember I started thinking about, like, oh my God, you're right. It's going to be a really terrible. I'm stuck as a cowboy for the rest of my career. I'll be like Corporal Kirchner. Just get rid of me after you've, used me up. And they come to the conclusion about a year later that it was a really bad idea. It's like, okay, we'll fire that guy. And it's like, okay, well, I didn't want that to happen, and I don't know how or why. It's really just funny how things happen. But I do remember knocking on the door, and I told him, I said, I don't want to be Cowboy Bret Hart. And he's like, you're kidding me. All the time you're waiting to give me a big bowl, and here it was on a dish. And I said, I want to be a cowboy. I said, why don't you tag me up with Jimmy Hart's managing Anvil now, and they all got the last name Hart in our names. Why don't you call me the Hart Foundation? Wow. The Hart Foundation. And he said, looked at me, he goes, you could never be a bad guy. You're always going to be a good guy in this business. And I was like, And I was like, that was, and he said, don't worry, something will come up. That was about 1 in the morning. I knocked on his door in the hotel that night. And I remember when I walked away, I just thought I just blew it. I just shot myself in the head. This is probably the best idea that's ever going to come along for me. I just shot it down, and they'll never do anything with me, and it'll be my fault. Look back and go, I should have done that Cowboy Bret Hart thing. Watch somebody else on TV doing it, making all the money for years. But they came to me a few weeks later, and I called them up to quit. I went to another TV taping, and I remember going in and looking at all the sheets, like whether I had a match. It was a TV taping, so it was like lots of matches. And I kept going through the thing, and I realized that I'm off again. Like I've been off for about 4 or 5 months by that time. And I just got so tired of being off, and I actually left the building in kind of a huff. And I remember the next day, I told the guy, I said, I'm going to call you in the morning. And I actually was calling in the morning to quit. Tell him I was just going to go home. That I didn't feel like I was going to get any kind of a chance down there. I was this close to quitting, and I phoned up the next day on time to quit, and I said, what are your plans with me for the next year or so? And right away they told me, so we're going to tag you up with Neidhart, just like you wanted. I call you as the Hart Foundation. And I was like,
Cha-ching.
I didn't think that was going to be the greatest thing in the world at the time, but I said, at least I can take control now of my matches. Like the bad guy drives the car in a match. Like when you watch a really great wrestling match, it's the bad guy that sets the pace and does the cheating and does all the sort of builds the match around the good guy. And the good guy just has to shine when he's supposed to. And being a good guy is harder too in lots of ways. But I knew finally that I could drive the car. I can be in charge of the match instead of having a guy like Rene Gouet tell me to sunset flip for the 3rd time. Oh my God, another sunset flip. I think no one's gonna think I know any other move. But I thought, now I'm gonna show these guys that outwork everybody, outperform, and I'm gonna blow you all away. I know that nobody thought so at the time, but I knew that day in the hallway that it's like, now that they turned me into a bad guy, losing doesn't matter, for one. I don't care if I lose anymore. And I'm gonna make a big difference. I'm gonna show these guys, I'm gonna show everybody that I can actually really wrestle. Because by then, they already sort of dubbed me as a guy that wasn't very good, that had no charisma, had no wrestling, nothing special about my wrestling. And, you know, I think within a few weeks of just being a bad guy, like, they put us with the Bulldogs right off the bat. And our job was to make the Bulldogs. And I remember going, well, that's okay, we'll make the Bulldogs, because as soon as we make the Bulldogs, we'll make ourselves. We'll be really good too. And we all had a lot of chemistry back then, the four of us. And it's kind of sad today when you watch the old Hart Foundation Bulldog matches. The ones that are available on video and stuff, those are the first ones we ever had. Like the real best ones we had were all over the course of the year. But they just filmed that one, you know, one in Boston Garden, one in Madison Square Garden, and a couple others like that. Maybe it was Toronto, a couple places, but there was a couple of places, and they picked right when we started, and you never saw the really good matches, or at least not so much of what we had. Such good matches over the next 2 or 3 years. They were champions, and when we were champions. And I wish now that they'd filmed some of those. They're not likely to find any.
Following up on that, you know, as you made the transition from the transition from you know, such a dominating tag team to singles. I remember this is back around 1990. A student of mine, he we wrestling fans. We used to talk after class, and I said, so you know, who's your favorite? I asked him one day. He said, Bret Hart. I said, oh yeah. I said, huh. This is like the post, you know, Hulkamania years, and for the most part, and then Flair had come up, and I remember when Flair got the title, and I wasn't too thrilled with Flair here at all. I really wasn't. But then when Mean Gene Okerlund announced the new World Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion, I'm like, who the hell is it? Bret, the Hitman Hart. He came out. I was floored. I said, no way. He's got the world title. I said, all right. And it was just.
I was for it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I didn't even
That's
know that.
awesome.
Well, obviously behind the scenes in the works with you and Flair and all that, but it was so cool because, you know, having gone through, you know, I used to watch. Bob Backlund was champ when I was a kid, and then the Hulkster, you know, for all those years, and then, you know, back and forth, Ultimate Warrior, Macho Man a bit, and then Flair. Like, it just didn't feel right at all. But then you came back, you came on board as champ, and it was just such a cool era that you ushered in. So that was neat. Then it, in my estimation, it kind of the evolution to the Attitude Era. That's a whole other thing. But when you were champ, though, that was a real exciting, good time to be a wrestling fan. Great stuff.
654 days in the 90s.
654 days?
600.
How many reigns?
I think it was three or four.
Yeah.
Longest
In the 90s.
in the 90s.
That's right, I know that, yeah.
I've had a lot of guys that, you know, I had a Sergeant Slaughter pulled me aside about a year ago in one of the last WrestleMania in New Orleans. And he told me, because I just want to thank you. And he said, you saved wrestling. And I said, I thought, you know, that's a nice compliment, but I thought, you know, it's a pretty strong statement to make that I saved wrestling. And I said, I appreciate that or something. He said, oh no, I'm not kidding. I said, because you saved wrestling. Because we don't know where, after Hulkamania and the Hulk period, which was so big, that it almost, I guess, in some wrestlers' opinion, you know, Sergeant Slaughter's, is that it was almost died after that, especially with the scandals and you know, if you look at that whole time period, you know, it went from Hulk Hogan, like you said, Warrior and Macho Man.
Yeah.
Macho Man was a great wrestler, but I was not a guy that was famous for my charisma so much as I was famous for great matches. I think I brought wrestling back to the forefront of the business rather than about how big your arms were, how big how tall you were, and I think in a lot of ways I take that as a huge compliment, and I think that you know, I did do a lot to sort of remind people that it's not bodybuilding, it's pro wrestling. You know, I don't care how big your arms are. You know, put a headlock on, or you don't know how to do a takedown, or you know, I don't think you're a great wrestler.
Yeah, I've heard about the the charisma critique regarding you, but I mean, it's look, you got Hulk's dynamic personality. You got the Ultimate Warrior talking about the gods in Olympus battling, and then raging in heaven, stuff like that. And with you though, it was always it was a different tone. It was a serious tone. It's like, this guy means business. So I don't think it was a lack of charisma per se. I think it was more it was an understated, your whole portrayal and your promos and all that. So it brought about a more serious aspect to the wrestling, and I thought it was effective. It was it was different than what was before, for the previous few years. But again, it ushered in a whole new dynamic that I thought was very successful. Yeah.
I think in order to be a really great wrestler, you have to be a really great fan first. And I was a fan of wrestling. I mean, I studied it and watched it all my life. From the time I was about 4 or 5 years old, I watched it like every week. Watched some of the best wrestlers in the world wrestle, and I had the best seat. I was front row at the timekeeper, sitting at his table, looking up. And I really got educated to what really good wrestling was. And I know that there's like charisma is a big part of it, and promos, and for me, it was about the wrestling. When I watched wrestling, I'd see somebody go for a drop kick, and the guy would take a bump without getting touched by the feet. As a kid watching it, I was like, that's a fail. That's lousy. Wrestlers talking in the ring, communicating all the time. Sometimes you're right there watching, and he's telling the guy what to do.
The mics pick it up.
That's a fail. Well, even just for me as a kid back in the 60s and stuff, it's like, that's a fail. Like, and it's like I go through and rate wrestlers in my own head, and when I watch the world champions work, and I watched how good they were, guys like Harley Race or Pat O'Connor and these guys, those kind of guys, how smooth and skilled they were, and I thought, that's great wrestling. And all through my career it was about that kind of stuff, about trying to make it real all the time. That's what I try to do the most. Even the whole, you can critique me today about what happened with me and Shawn and the screw job. The truth is, I tried my best when I came back to draw as much money with Shawn as possible, and I was on my way to doing that until everything went south.
Wow.
We got worked into a shoot about what we were saying about each other, but the reality is, and I don't know how many people read my book, but I told Shawn, I met Shawn in July and told him everything that was happening, what was going to happen with me and him when I came back, and that I was going to be a baby face that was going to have a chip on his shoulder about him and everything he did, how he cost me, how he took my title and never really beat me fair and square, and that was my thread of realism. And I took that and I came back, and I remember even when I did the signing to come back before I fought Austin at Survivor Series, they had me do a signing that I signed back with WWE. And even that night I said to Shawn before I walked out, I said, I'm going to go in and say something about you posing for Playgirl magazine. Do you have a problem with that? He's like, go at it. He had no problems with it at all until I came back to the dressing room. He looked like I shot him in the heart. He was so crushed when I came back that it was kind of like there's a war on now. Like, wow. And I was like, is that okay? And he was like, he was just crushed. And I knew he was crushed. I thought, that's good. Because everyone in the dressing room is going to think that we got this real thing going. And I've already filled you in on all this. This is not real. And this is, but he got worked up about all that stuff. And it's like, I kept thinking, like, this is really going good. They all think we hate each other. And, it's just too bad that we lost the point there. Because we would have had some great matches and done some great business. And, WrestleMania 12 with Shawn should have been the first of about 5-6 classic matches.
Yes. Oh God.
I gave him your match between you two at Survivor Series 92.
That was the out of shape Shawn.
Yeah,
That was a different Shawn.
that was a different.
That was the bulky Shawn Michaels.
Scraping Shawn off the mat. Shawn told me before he went out, he goes, I haven't had a single match in a really long time, so we got to take it easy out there. And so we did. I was just grateful at that time to have somebody that could work with me. You know, I had when I won the title, there was very little to work with as far as matchups. And I was lucky that Bam Bam came in and a few guys, because I had nobody to work with. So Scott Hall.
Mhm.
You know, it was funny too, and like you won the title back then, like you were still like on TV almost every week defending it. You never saw that back then. Like Hogan would have the belt. You'd see him twice a year, the pay-per-view at Mania, the big payday, and that was it. Like,
After I lost to Piper, or after I beat Piper at WrestleMania 8,
Yeah. That's his only loss.
for that day, or even within the day before that, or going into that period, they had told me next summer that they were looking at me and Jake the Snake at
Yeah.
SummerSlam.
Oh.
And I remember going, wow, that'll be great.
Yeah.
That'll be really, because Jake was a great wrestler.
Yeah.
Say what you want about him, but he was a great wrestler.
Yeah.
And then he had that little thing with Undertaker in his
Mhm.
match, that WrestleMania 8, where he got tombstoned on the floor and didn't do the finish in the ring and all that.
Mhm.
So he quit or got fired or both, and so that match never happened.
Mhm.
Then when I won the Survivor Series, or I mean next year when I won the title, or a few months later, and when I first won it, Vince told me, he goes, "You're going to work with Warrior at the Royal Rumble, sharpshooter right in the middle."
Whoa.
Wow.
Yes,
Awesome.
never happened. Failed his drug test and got fired.
Ah.
And then at the WrestleMania, I lost the belt to Hogan.
Oh, well.
And I remember Hogan saying to me in the dressing room, he goes, "He thanking me for it and telling me," I'm looking like I was so disgusted that I was really disappointed.
Terry.
And everybody looked at me and said, "I'm looking forward to returning the favor to you down the road." And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
okay. I remember I said right to him in the dressing room, I said, "I'm going to remember that, and I want you to remember that, because I'm going to bring that up to you when this happens." And I knew then, I said, you know what's going to happen is I'm going to fight Hulk at SummerSlam. Because I could tell after I won the belt that even though I lost the belt, that the crowd, in those days, the crowds that we had for Hulk in the early 80s were almost always sellouts. Everything was a sellout, and wrestling was huge. When I got the belt in '92, things had tapered off a little bit, so there wasn't sellouts so much anymore. Now the buildings were about 3/4 full. But the 3/4 full crowd that was in there, they were Bret Hart fans. They weren't Hulk Hogan fans or anyone else's fans. I was at the peak of my career at that time. So when they pulled that belt away from me and gave it to Hogan at WrestleMania in Vegas, I was crushed. I thought, geez, I don't know why they went. It's almost like a step backwards. Like we've gone back to the Hulk stuff when he was already we wrote him off. And, he didn't draw very well, and the fans that were my fans were diehard, still Bret Hart fans, and they just didn't buy the Hulk Hogan thing at all. And I guess he maybe saw the writing on the wall that maybe things were still not going to be that good from there, and then he went to WCW. But I was supposed to wrestle when I won the King of the Ring. That was the setup for me and Hogan to work at SummerSlam. And Vince had called me up about 3 or 4 days before the King of the Ring to tell me that I was beating Hulk. I was going to beat Hulk in SummerSlam, sharpshooter. When I got the phone, I was like, I was pretty pumped about that. And I thought, I already heard say to me just a few months ago that he'd be happy to return the favor. So then Vince says, don't say anything to him yet. But I'm going to bring it up to him first before anyone else does. And that's business. That's normal. So I didn't say anything. And he called me a couple of days later to tell me that the Hulk wouldn't go for it. That he'd never put me over in a million years.
Whoa.
6 weeks up, and I was not in his league. That's what he said.
Wow.
I remember when Vince told me, it's going to piss you off when I tell you this. And he said, you're not even in his league. And that did piss me off. And,
Lit a fire.
I did the King of the Ring, and I went in and confronted him in the dressing room, and I told him off for saying that to me, about me, and he denied it. And he came up with some big story. I don't think him and Vince actually concocted a story to somehow sort of calm me down, because I left in a huff that night. And I actually had the day off the next day because I was too beat up from the King of the Ring. I could next day and they gave me the day off. The only time I think in my career that they actually gave me the day off. But Hulk pulled me aside and maybe went to Vince's office or locker room or whatever. And then they somehow tried to make out like, oh, the reason Hulk didn't want to put me over or have a match with me was because it was a non-title match. It wasn't going to be for the title. And I go, that's not what Vince told me. Vince wanted it to be a title match. And then that's how they somehow like, oh, that's where this whole thing is just a misunderstanding. You know? But I'm thinking, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's all bullshit because I remember they put me and Hulk at the TV tapings that we'd done about a week before. They had us. That's why I know it's bullshit. Is we had a tug of war with the belt. He's holding the belt and I'm holding the belt and we're looking at each other eye to eye. And he's like, wait, I think in those days they'd have him stand on a box. Staring down at me and it's like,
Attitude
yeah,
sports.
it was fine, you know. And I just when they tried to say that it wasn't going to be a title match, and that's what Hulk's beef was. Like, well, that's bullshit. That's not bullshit. And I remember I said both to Vince and Hogan and Sarah, so one of you guys lied to me here. You know, being honest with me. That's all I'm going to say. I don't buy it. You're not being honest, and it's bullshit. Oh, leave it at that.
Let's see, maybe take some questions from the audience.
You go first.
Oh, I was just wondering who in the current crop of WWE talent you respect and why.
Well, I really like Cody Rhodes.
Cody.
Technique-wise, he throws really good punches. Punches are hard to throw.
Mm-hmm.
He throws really good punches. Scary Sherry used to throw great punches. You can count the guys that throw good punches. They're hard to do, and I think there's a handful of guys that throw good punches. The guy's watching Rock throw punches. He does that where he opens his hand and slaps it close, and it's like, please. Stick with movies. You know, I love Rock, but I mean, there's just some guys that are just, you know, like I said, when I was a kid, I graded guys on their work in the ring and their punches and their kicks and their believability and of not hurting anybody. I mean, the key to the art to wrestling is to not injure guys. And, you know, I think when I make the boast all the time that I was the best there is, the best there was, best there will be, I remind people it's not because I think I was the best. It's because I had such an incredible safety record. I never hurt one wrestler in my whole career. A handful anyway. Chip Vader's teeth was just, I'd like to think I was doing the world a favor.
How'd you chip him?
I had a spot where I picked up a chair. And I went over in the dressing room and I said, well, I pick the chair up and have it upside down, like the back of the chair, and I'm going to bring it down. I said, just lie there. I'll bring it right here on your throat, but I'll never hit you on the throat. I'll just hit you right on your neck here. I said, but whatever you don't move.
Oh, he flinched.
So he goes, I won't move. And he goes, so we'll do it. So I went in the ring and I'm standing over top of him. It was a Monday Night Raw. And I stood over top of him to give him the chair and started to come down. And he went, and I knocked a bunch of his teeth out.
Ooh.
They were all capped anyway. He came back, he goes, it wasn't your fault, it was my fault. So I go, give me a clean slate still. I didn't hurt anybody, you did it yourself. For that kind of thing. And the only guy I think of that actually hurt in wrestling and hurt really bad was when I wrestled Kevin Nash at the Survivor Series, and I won the title from him when I went crashing through the table. I took out the Spanish announcer. I really feel bad about it because they didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell him that I was coming out of the ring. No one knew. It was like a big surprise. And they reinforced that table. Like they cut it in half, and then they put a bunch of plywood underneath, like reinforced it. And I remember when they did that, it was as strong as it ever was.
Wow.
When I went crashed at that table, that was a hard fall.
Oh, yeah.
And I blew that poor little guy's knee out.
Oh,
Oh,
You
boy.
watch it, he's lying on the ground, he's in great agony, and
it's valid.
I always feel bad. It's like, that first hurt minutes, he got hurt because of me. And never said anything about it. But there there's consequences to wrestling.
Yeah.
When you were saying earlier about how the bad guy would control the matches, when you would do like a match like you did with Benoit and Owens, who would control that? Because you guys were both top faces at the time.
You both kind of map out a kind of strategy towards how you see the match going. When I say the bad guy controls the match, it's the good guy has every bit as much control in the match. Like when I was a good guy, I still control all my match and set everything up.
I've always said that you and possibly Kurt Angle could probably get in the ring with a paper bag and a sack of potatoes and still put on a great show. And it's just how you were. It's how you.
Some guys can. The best wrestler, I think, for spot. Like if you could grab one wrestler and just go in and have a match and say you got to wrestle for an hour. I don't just figure it out while you're out there without even talking. I can do that with Mr. Perfect. I can do that with my brother Owen. I could do it with a lot of guys. You could have done it with Shawn. Shawn was one of the best wrestlers for that. There were some guys that were just really, they had that sense about what to do, good guy or not. But sometimes the good guy has to wait for the bad guy to do stuff. No matter how good you are as a good guy, if you don't have a good bad guy, you can have a lousy match. I was really, whenever I looked at an opponent, whether it was Mantar or whoever it was, I looked at him like, okay, what do people want to see in this match? And I think you just I always try to give you credible, believable matches. Sometimes I was like, well, he's not a real high flyer, so we're not going to be doing a lot of high flying. We're not going to do, we'll just wrestle the kind of style that suits his gimmick and his personality. And I always think I brought the best out in my opponents all the time. A lot of guys I can remember guys like Warlord and Barbarian and guys like that. They used to love wrestling. They were so happy and they were always putting me over, which was always appreciated on my side. And it was my job to go in there and make them look as good as possible. And I would go in there and take front turnbuckles and do certain moves and things for them. And they appreciated it. They'd throw me in the front turnbuckle and then they'd feel sorry for me. Come over and try to pick me. They would look at me like, oh my God, you almost killed yourself. And it's like, I think that's why I really enjoyed making my opponent. Like I remember sometimes they'd sit down with me and I was like, what are we gonna do? This is what we're gonna do. You're gonna do this, and this, and can you? I'd ask them things that they did. And, they get excited about what they were gonna do to me because they were listening to me explain to them, visualizing what they're gonna do, and they're like, I love it. They love the match before the fans even see it. They're going, this is gonna be so much fun for me to do this kind of stuff. And that's what I loved about what I delivered to the ring. I brought the best out of my opponents. I tried my hardest to always safe for the most part. That's what I remember best.
I saw a match live at the Worcester Centrum with you versus, was it the Warlord or the Barbarian? One of the Powers of Pain, singles match. And he had you up on a suplex, straight up, for over 30 seconds. I said, what was this? But you ended up winning, but just thinking that.
I never understood what holding somebody up.
Yeah, I mean, you're
how that
straight
makes
as
it
an
more
arrow.
Painful.
Yeah, what's the point?
The blood rush.
Showing up and
Conan, I remember he used to run, hit the ropes and do a somersault, and then hit the ropes and do a clothesline. Like, how does that make it faster?
Just looks cooler.
This thing's just the fun project, but,
The fellow in the audience mentioned Kurt Angle. Not so long ago, I read an interview with Kurt Angle, and he mentioned how when he was getting into pro wrestling, he watched your matches. It was you, and he watched your matches over and over and over, and because he pretty much, he learned a lot of his pacing from you. So that's why I thought it was interesting. He mentioned Kurt Angle. Yeah.
we've met many times over the years,
yeah.
and we always, especially when he was, he just left WWE, or around those days, if I used to say if I could go back and have one match, it'd be with Kurt
Yeah.
Angle. Now I can name about 10 wrestlers that I go back.
Oh.
I'd like to have Punk's last match.
Yeah.
I'd love to have wrestled.
great
I'd love to have wrestled John Cena.
Yeah.
Really, especially if I could have drove the car, which I would.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I would have drove him to some great matches.
He needs to learn to throw punches though.
Yeah.
Well, he needs to, what's that punch that he does where he jumps up?
Five knuckle shuffle.
Five knuckle
shuffle.
shuffle where he never hits anyone's head. You know, as a kid, for me, that was the worst. That's a big fail. Like, when I was a little kid watching John Cena, I would have been like, well, who's next? And I love John Cena. He's a really hard worker and he's a great wrestler, but I don't know why some guys don't perfect their technique a little bit better. Like even now, after all this time, he still throws that lousy punch.
Yeah.
It's just terrible.
Gotta switch it up a little bit.
Just try hitting the guy for once.
I just wanted this. You were teamed up with Neidhart, and my grandfather and my mother took me down to Providence Civic Center, and it was the first time I saw you in ring, and I was about 12, 13 years old, and it was the best thing I ever saw. It was seriously, it's one of the best matches I ever saw, and when you were talking about it, it was just all came back. I could smell the popcorn. I could be sitting with my grandpa passed away a couple years ago,
We get that autograph.
and just this chance to meet you and hear your story.
Well, you know, I always, even when I worked for my dad, I always tried my hardest to be. I was that little kid watching the same wrestling that you're watching, and I wanted to believe it was real. I wanted to really believe that it meant something. That these guys, you know, that's how I always felt about wrestling. If you watch my career, I mean, even in old Stampede days, like I always had a lot of intensity. Winning was everything, losing was everything. Like when you lost, it was like, not that it was real, but it's like you got to play in your mind like, you know, somehow this loss is going to affect my position, my ratings. I'll be getting less pay. I'll get less opportunities. Like there was a match I had with Ricky Steamboat, and we were talking about it. It's on one of those DVDs. And, you know, they had just told me that our match, we were supposed to wrestle at WrestleMania that year. WrestleMania 2 or 3? 2, yeah. And that night they came in the dressing room and said, it's scratched. You're in the Battle Royal now. And I was like, it was all crushed. It was the worst opportunity for me to show my wrestling skills. All I had to do was stand around and do the odd thing. But so I was pretty let down. I remember Ricky Steamboat said to me, let's go out there tonight and show them a match that they would have seen at WrestleMania if they let us wrestle. And we only wrestled twice, but then the first match was Boston Garden. You know, just in saying that about, like, when you watch that match, you know, I lost to Ricky. But you could see in my eyes and my facial expressions and my intensity of my face and that loss was a huge loss. And when I remember it was emotionally it was kind of a hard match too, because it was kind of a letdown and all that. But I was really proud of it. It's like that match captured all the realism of what, like a little kid watching that's gonna go. That match meant something to him, and that's I think what set me apart from a lot of wrestlers. The matches did mean something. The winning did mean something. The losing did mean something. You watch me walk back to the dressing room after I lost to Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 12. It's like the same thing. It's like it means something. Whereas like if you know if it doesn't mean anything to you, you can tell. And again, that's what I try to always bring it, keep it real all the time.
We should have, too bad we didn't book this for longer, because it's 10 hours. And I was he's been waiting for questions. I know other people have questions, but I don't know where Rick is. Where's the fellow Rick? Is that?
I don't know.
Yeah, you got time. There you are, sorry, I didn't see you for a second. Yeah. All right, so,
All right,
yes, I have a few,
All right.
just one
My
more
favorite
song,
match
yeah.
with you was with British Bulldog at SummerSlam '92. Was that a great experience for you? Was that one of your favorite matches of all time?
One of my greatest matches, one of my greatest moments. And I say that even though I lost.
Yeah.
I love the match. And the hardest part of that match, and you probably read my book, but Davey was not up to snuff that day.
Yeah, I did.
And it's hard to tell. And Davey was,
I know who carried the match.
Davey was out of gas.
I watch the match all the time.
The first 3 minutes of the match, he was finished.
Yep.
Panic.
Thank you. Thank you very much for answering that question.
Maybe you can ask.
Stiffest ring you ever worked in?
Stiffest ring, St. Louis. The old, they used to have an old boxing ring, which was as big as a stage. It was an old style boxing ring. She wrestled in it for years, and it was tough. It was like wrestling on the floor. This floor was soft.
Everyone, make sure you swing by Mr. Hart's table again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.